Alright, so in this video I'm going to be doing some oil pan baffling. This is my first time ever doing it, so I just kind of going off of some ideas I've seen from some aftermarket pans. And I'll get into that a little bit later on in the video, but I'm going to kind of probably shoot this and do in a couple different parts at least, but kind of two main parts, so I'm not doing this all in the same day. Not that it really matters, but it's just put that out there in case somebody thinks it's quicker than it is, I guess. But I'm going to start with taking the old paint off because it's kind of gnarly, and I'm gonna strip the paint and then repaint it. I have picked up a can of Rust-Oleum dark blue, which is very close to. It's a gloss that I got, and it's very close to the Ford blue, the big block. Small block Ford is supposed to be a little bit lighter, but anyway, so just so you know, Rust-Oleum does have a really close color. And the other thing too is, so this is the pan that came on the Thunderbird originally. As you can see here, perhaps, I don't know if you can pick it up on video, but the pan is dented a little bit, not much, probably like half inch at the most. So, which is a problem because that obviously is limiting some oil storage, and also could be getting into the pickup. So currently what I have on the car is an aftermarket, just a cheap aftermarket pan. But in knowing what I know now, I realize that I really need to get some baffling in my car just with the output it's going to have. And I've never ran, as far as I know, I've never run into oil problems but I've never done a really hard pull in the car either. And so that's something to take into consideration. But moving forward, I know that I'm gonna definitely starve my engine if I try to race it or anything like that. So ideally, I would like to be going with a deeper sump pan, like a higher capacity pan. But they're very expensive, and I feel, and then plus then you got to buy a new pickup really to get the full advantages. So for me, I'm looking probably, with shipping and all that good stuff, probably like $600 or $700 easily just for the pan. So I'm going to see if I can use the stock pan and just kind of modify it a little bit to get what I need out of it. So anyways, so yeah, I might have got sidetracked, but anyway, so this got dropped. That's why I got the new pan, and I set this one aside, but then I'm going to try to knock the dent out of it. And as long as it'll be strong enough, it's just kind of dented in the center section. Little side note, that's why it's important to jack your vehicle very carefully, because that's what happened here. Is I was jacking it, not being careful as I should. That was a long time ago. I didn't really know what I know now. This was like almost 6 years ago, five or 6 years ago. I think it was 5 years ago when I first got the car. And so the jack slipped off and crunched that. So anyways, hopefully that's enough explanation for that. But I'm going to try to get a dolly in here and flatten this out here. I know I can do it. I just don't know, because the way the manual says to raise the engine up to be able to get the pan out is off of the jack. There's more than one way to do it, but that's the easiest way. Saves you having to strip your engine down. But it does tell you to block it. So I don't think the strength of it, because you're not going to be jacking right in the middle anyways. But the strength. So actually, and the backup, to clarify, I wasn't jacking on the pan. I was jacking on the cross member, like the K member, and the car rolled forward a little bit, and the jack slipped off and landed on here. So that's how that happened. So anyways, hopefully that's enough explanation. So I'm going to start just with taking all the paint off, and we'll go for there. So I'm going to just mount it on that block with some screws just to hold itself, and that'll be that. Okay, so the pan is all cleaned up, and went around and I'm feeling some of the holes here. I think I definitely need to do some dressing here, because this pan's probably been off a couple of times over its life, but at any rate, these high spots here, and you can kind of feel them as you run your fingers, might interfere with the sealing. So ideally if you have a dolly or something, but I don't have one, so next best thing I found fits is the back of a cat's paw here. Just to kind of have somebody to hammer against, because you don't want to warp any of that. So I'm going to go ahead and go around with that, just kind of tap the high spots, see if I can flatten a little bit, and then if that doesn't work, I might just dress it really quickly with a flapper disc or something, just to kind of get it flat. So these high spots are coming out really well actually doing this. And so this fits in really well. Just hold it tight, and then I've never done this before, but I've done a lot of the other metalworking. It's part of what I do for my job. Not this nature of metalworking, but anyways. For those of you who don't have any experience, one thing to do in a case like this is instead of just coming straight, and mind you want to take really gentle blows, because you don't want to warp the flange yourself. By kind of like when you hit it, kind of slide your hammer a little bit. So hold this flat and go both ways. I don't know if you can see that, but kind of slide into it a little bit. This one's really bad here. Try to get you in here. So these actually all went out pretty good. I might still hit it really quickly just to make sure with a flapper or disc or something. But that one's in there. Basically, the purpose of this is so you have something to hit against, because if you just hit it straight, you're just going to be knocking the flange down probably. Unfortunately, you can't see this on camera. You can only really feel it in person. But okay, so that seemed to work pretty well. Obviously, the less grinding of any sort, the better, because you don't want to thin it out if you don't have to. One thing you'll notice with some of the older pans, just like the stamping and stuff, is maybe not as polished as like a modern pan would be, but it still does the trick. So, but what I am going to do is just kind of pass a file along, just to kind of show me if there's any high spots. It's kind of awkward holding this down, but I could even use a longer one. It's really hard to, I think I'm going to put my foot here. So you can see, you can probably pick that up on camera, but even after just a brief amount of filing, you can see, sure enough, all the high spots are right around here. So even after dolling it, I could have maybe tried to go a little farther, and I don't know, somebody could correct me if I was doing that wrong, but that's essentially how I understand that you're supposed to dolly these. There might be a better method, but basically you want it flat. So like I said, I don't think it's a good idea to take very much material off. So, but I'm just gonna go around and kind of hit the high spots, and just that way I can at least see if there's something like major. Because that's the good thing about filing is it also shows you what's going on. Okay, so the dolly idea with this didn't really seem to work. It wasn't really doing anything. One thing that might help is to heat it up, but I don't have a torch. Well, I have a propane one, I think, but that won't really do a ton. So anyway, so what I'm doing is just using the rounded edge of the hammer and just taking it little blows, and that is working. I should have known better. Like, I should have realized that sheet metal doesn't really come out that easily. Part of me was thinking that this steel was actually harder than it is, but it's actually pretty soft. So has quite a bit of bounce to it. Anyway, so it's not going to look pretty, but I don't really care as long as it works. And actually, if I can get it lower than factory by a little bit, every little bit helps. So we'll see how it goes. And I know you don't want it too far from your pickup, but the other idea I had, I don't know if this is at the end of the day is really going to do much, but it's putting these, like, they're not rough, they're smooth divots in it, but theoretically, especially if they're a little bit rough, that would help grab the oil. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but with the baffling, that may or may not, the little bit of extra, what would you call it, dimpling in there might help hold on to some of the oil and just help it, yeah, I know it's microscopic on the amount that it might help, but theoretically it should help something. So I don't know, we'll see. So I'm just going to keep hammering that out and then show you what it looks like from there. Okay, so I think I got it pretty good here. Quite a bit of hammering, but it actually went really easily down using this. And the other thing too is I actually did get it a little bit lower. I'll show you in a second, but I wanted to be careful. For one thing, it's not going to really go that much without maybe heating it and really stretching it, but I don't want to get too crazy because it could also compromise the strength. Anyways, but also this spot here ideally should be kind of one of the lowest spots. Even though the drain plug is not actually down all the way, it still should be one of the lowest spots. But that's what it looks like there. So I'm at least flush, if not just slightly lower, like, 1/8 inch kind of thing, 1/4 inch at the most. But it worked. So it looks a little dimply, a little gnarly, but it'll do the job. So now I'm gonna get into some of the baffling stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna get going on the baffling here. And I'm just kind of basing what I'm doing off of some, like I mentioned, some aftermarket pans, so some different brands, whatever, and also just watching some videos. But I've never done this before. However, I do kind of have my own take on how I think it should be. So when the pan is sitting, like, given that the car is relatively flat, the pan is sitting, I don't know if other pans are a little bit different or not as, Dodge or Chevy. I know Chevy a lot of times had rear sump, which was good, so you wouldn't really have as much of a problem. Actually, I should just back up. So, in case I didn't mention it, the reason for the baffling is under hard acceleration. I think I might have kind of briefly touched on it, but if I hadn't, so the reason for the baffling is under hard acceleration, all the oil in the front sump, and this is a front sump, so it's at the front of the motor, all the forces acting against it is going to want to push the oil to the back of the pan, and so which could lead to exposing your oil sump, which will lead to not having oil, etc., which could wreck your engine, among other things. So not to mention, I wasn't the one who I was told that I needed that I should get a high volume pump. Now, there is a difference apparently between a high pressure high volume and just a high volume. So high volume doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be higher pressure, but regardless, it's drawing more oil faster. The thought is that sometimes what can happen with those, especially if you have a higher revving engine, is that you will deplete your oil in the pan faster than it can drain back through the top of your motor and stuff. So essentially what's happening is the baffling is under hard acceleration is gonna, I'm gonna build a shelf here which will keep the oil from, wanting to rush to the back of the pan, but also allow it to flow back. So anyway, so getting back to where I was going with that is this pan, as you can see, it's sitting kind of level here. Hopefully I have a good shot of that. I'm kind of blocking it a little bit. Let me back up here. So you can see it has a pretty good slope for oil drain back. I don't know, some pans may be a little bit more flat. I'm assuming most pans that they thought that through enough and did a pretty substantial slope. So that being said, when I do my shelving, my baffle, I don't want it to put it straight. I want to kind of follow the angle of the drain back as it's going. Or do what some people call like oil return slots. The problem I have with the oil return slot is, when they leave like a gap here or something, well, you're kind of defeating the purpose in my opinion, because the whole purpose is to keep like basically any oil here from getting back while simultaneously allowing oil to drain back. Because, you got a little more than half of your crank, slinging oil here and, dripping back. But you also do have some of it returning at the front. And I don't know exactly on this motor whether or not there's a bias between the front or the back draining more oil back into the pan, or if it's the same. But at any rate, in my mind, there's, you're not really going to get much benefit if the oil can just as easily pass underneath. So hopefully that makes sense. But so for more or less, my train of thought is that I'm going to keep it flush. Hopefully, I know it's kind of awkward here. I'm going to pick up the camera here. So I'll show it a little bit more clearly, but more or less I want the tin to follow the angle here. I don't want it kicking up for sure, because that'll keep oil from being able to drain back. So some of you who have looked into baffling know what I'm talking about, but I'll explain it a little bit more as I get my piece made. So, and then getting ahead of myself a teeny bit, but I'm still considering doing kind of like a primitive, what's called a crank scrape, or like a crank comb. A proper one really needs to be done. I could do it with the engine in the car, but it would be really hard, and I'm not interested in that. Because basically a true crank scrape, actually I think typically is mounted to the either to like a girdle or to your main caps. I think some of them may also be mounted to the pan, but regardless, a couple aftermarket pans I looked at it's not like a true crank scrape of what you'd think of it being, because that is totally another animal. But there's kind of like just a row of tin that you can put along here to kind of catch, because what I've heard is, and I don't know how they know this, but I think maybe from see-through oil pans or whatnot, they can tell. But the story goes that, oil kind of forms like ropes as it gets caught up in your crank, which can lead to quite a bit of power loss. Moreover, like even if you don't really have power loss, the way it's set up, you could achieve power gains by, proper windage trays and mesh and all that kind of deal. So anyway, so I'm still thinking about it, but basically what it is just a simple ledge. It would be a lot smaller than this. That kind of, you weld it here and it comes down maybe like an inch thick. And as the crank rotates, so this crank should be rotating like this. So if you're facing the engine clockwise, and so any ropes that it has, or mist or kind of oil will come and it'll have something to catch it against. So it's kind of like a knockoff crank scraper. They actually called it a crank scraper on the ads. So anyways, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm thinking of doing one on both sides. So this one would be facing down, the edge would be facing down too. So when the crank goes like this, you know, strands or whatever that are wanting to whip up like this will catch on that ledge and drain back faster. The same idea here, it would be facing up. So any oil that's caught from the motor draining down, if that makes sense. So any oil coming down, getting caught will face like that. So hopefully that makes sense. But this one, in my mind, if I'm thinking correctly, will point up a little bit. This one will point down. So I've only ever seen it on this side. But it stands to reason that if it's on that side, by the same token, it could be useful on this side. Now I just want to be careful that I'm not going to be getting into the, you know, I need to make it small enough because the motor's in the car, so it's going to be hard to mock it up if it's too big. And I got all my belts on and that, so it's hard for me to turn my motor over by hand to, you know, see. So anyways, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start, like I mentioned earlier, I do metal working as part of my job, so I already have some of the tools that'll make this job go easier. But I'm gonna, so this is just regular steel, raw steel, and so it'll be easier to weld. So I think I'm just going to leave it. This piece is 24 by 6, and so I'm going to leave it 6 inches wide for now at least. But I'm going to start by measuring my pan. So tight is like 8 inches. So I'm going to go, I probably want to give myself like an inch on either side to weld, to bend up and weld. So let's say I think an inch will be good. So I'm going to do 10. The one thing I don't have is speed square. I don't think I really need it. I can eyeball it. So I'm just going to cut this. If you've never cut steel before or used hex, you might not be able to do that. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But I do it all the time, so I can cut it. Otherwise, you'll have to probably use a grinder. This is 22 gauge steel here, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to just have to scrape that off there before I go. So okay, so I buzzed the tag off. I'm just looking for my file. Here it is. So I buzzed the tag off there. Then I'm just going to take the sharp edge off just so I don't bleed to death. Anyway, so I'm just going to ballpark these benders here are about 1.25 inches. So I'm just actually going to go to the first notch, or the last notch there, and I don't necessarily need a super clean bend. Generally, I would just bend it like this, but it's gonna. I wanted a pretty sharp bend. If you just bend it straight away like that, it might be hard to get it crisp. So I'm gonna try breaking it a little bit like that. I don't know if I'm gonna get it. Sorry, I don't know if I'm gonna get it a clean enough bend here like that. One thing you can do is let me just show you on the block here. Is once you get it in position, you get something really hard to push against. Like that. Okay. That went well enough, clean enough. So there's that. Then I know I should really get my square out so I can get a clean bend. It's going to have to be hammered into place a little bit probably. But, so that was 8. So I'm going to go like 7 7/8 or just a little bit under, just so it's not too big, because too big is going to be hard to get it in there. So I'm just going to do some eye magic here. square that up. Get a nice tight grip on them. If you don't have this, just put it in a vise probably, I would say. Okay. So that's that. So back to the pan here. So basically the only thing I have to be mindful of here is that I'm going to be able to get my sump in. Now, that I'm going to be able to fit my pickup past this and not interfere with my pickup. But the pickup, I think, is going to be pretty close there. Part of what I'm doing is just kind of going off of pictures, but that's hard. So, you know, you need some sort of a shelf, but not too much. So, as you can see here, I'm kind of, you know, if you go just like a teeny little bit of a shelf there, that's not really going to do much. If you go too far, you're going to interfere with your pickup. But, so I'm probably going to go somewhere like halfway, I would think. And then I want to, so like going back to what I said earlier, with, and these divots here, as far as I know, are just relief bends from the factory. There may be a purpose for that, but I think they're just relief bends from the stamping process. But anyways, if I were to want some sort of drain back, that would be perfect because I can just rest it here. But the problem is under hard acceleration, all that oil in there, just as much as it's going to ride back here, by the same token, it's going to ride underneath and come out, if that makes sense. So that doesn't make sense to me. A lot of people do that, but it's like, I'm sure it'll still help windage, it'll still help with oil flow not going back, but it's not going to do much. So I think what I'm going to do is try to at least kind of pick a spot where it's going to go. I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. I'm not going to weld it obviously along here, but I want to at least close it off a little bit, because otherwise, you know, oil will come back. But you know, I don't, like I mentioned, I obviously don't want it kicked up like that. Any oil that falls here needs to be able to drain back. So if anything, I'm going to just like follow the angle or go a little bit more. But I think my plan is basically just follow the angle of the drain back and go from there. So I'm going to get this schmacked up a little bit and see how it looks after that. All right, so I've been tinkering around this for a while, and I think I'm going to go with more established wisdom and do allow for some drain back slots. I figure there's, you know, a lot of guys who've done this before, and I think I'm just going to go with what is commonly done in hopes that they're not wrong. Because obviously a lot of people know more than I do, and so I don't want to be that ignorant or arrogant, I guess is a better word. So anyways, what I've done is mocked it up here. So obviously got my tabs here, so I have something to tack weld. But this center section, I bent the tab down here, so that's going to contact. So the flow back will be on either side, which seems to be the most common way that the designs are done. So, and then I was thinking too, like even if I did close this off, well, that's going to actually create, like, even though it is slope, that's going to create like a 1/4 inch wedge or ledge here. At least with this design of pan with these ripples. So that's the other reason that I do want to allow for drain back, is because I don't want to have like a 1/4 inch edge for oil to catch here. But at the same token, you know, I don't want all the oil to just rush back. So I bent down the center one, so that'll close that off pretty well. And so that's that. And I'm not sure about a deceleration baffle. I'm not like, taking this on a road course or anything. As far, I'm just going to be drag racing with it, if anything. So yeah, we'll see. But anyways, I'm gonna try to play around with this a little bit and see what I can come up with for the crank scrapes. Okay, so I got the baffling welded in, and I know it probably looks like a third grader welded this. Definitely not a welder, but I borrowed my dad's flex core welder. And the other thing I wanted to mention is this steel that I got here is 22 gauge. That's all that they had. I happened to be at the hardware store, and that's all they had. But I would recommend going like a gauge or two thicker or something, because it did work, but it was just a little on the thin side. But you guys who are welders will laugh at this probably, but I figured out making sure the sheet metal is touching really tight. Any sort of gap, and it'll just want to burn through, because it started to burn through here. But anyways, it's on there, and I did manage to get welds that I think will be good enough. But this is definitely something you don't want to come off in your engine. Worst case scenario, it might interfere with your pickup, or it could fly off and get caught up in your crankshaft or something. So yeah, but the pan itself was plenty thick enough to weld. No problems there. You can see some bluing where I went through and whatnot. Then the other thing probably goes without saying, but just make sure any kind of slag or beads that have stuck anywhere are knocked down and knocked off. Make sure. I went over with a brush, but in addition to that, also have to go with a screwdriver or something, this knockoff, and then I went over all by hand, made sure I felt really good to make sure that there's no loose beads that'll come off. So anyway, so that's what it looks like. You can see the angle here is kind of consistent with the angle of the rest. And then again, I closed that section off and folded it up here. And then for my cheap crank scrape, I went with basically what the Canton brand has. The other thing I want to bring up is I had looked at some more brands of aftermarket pans, and some actually do have this closed off holloway. But again, with my situation, with there being these bumps here, I definitely think it's better to do it like this and have some drain back. That way there's not like a 1/4 inch or so 3/8 ledge. So yeah, I made sure that my welds are on there good enough, did a little pry test, and I think we should be good. So I'm going to clean this up and then spray it. Okay, so I got it cleaned up pretty good with some solvent cleaner, and then this is the paint I'm using. I mentioned earlier, but just Trim Clad dark blue gloss, so it's pretty close to Ford Big Block color. So gonna go ahead and paint this. Well, that's what it looks like. You can see a little bit gnarly, but looks a lot better. And main thing is just trying to keep it from rusting. So yeah, that's it. So I'm gonna do a video next time, hopefully within a couple weeks, within a week or two, getting the oil pan swapped out on the car. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully it all goes together well. So anyways, that's it for this time. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.